No one can make you feel inferior without your permission. But if you have the motivation to do it, you have the creativity and the resilience to keep pushing forward and not seeing it as a limitation, it's amazing how things become possible. Everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. Just have to take the step to overcome it and face it.
Spartans, listen up.
We need to sleep better. So how do you sleep better? Never thought about it before. And so I met Jack, I met Essentia. Pay attention to the mattress you sleep on because it's loaded with chemicals.
Recovery, cooling, and pressure relief, all in one mattress. Up to 60% more deep and REM sleep. Less inflammation, faster bounce back. No toxins, no EMFs, no BS.
My buddy Jack over at Essentia, he's kind enough to give us a code for the Spartan community. That's DECA, that's Tough Mudder, all of us. Use Spartan25, get a discount. Prioritize your sleep so you can sleep faster, you can do more burpees, you can train more, you can get healthier. When you sleep well, you live well.
Welcome to the Hard Way podcast with Joe DeSena, founder and CEO of Spartan Races. We're teaching you how to overcome your obstacles in your life the same way we teach our 10 million plus Spartans to overcome obstacles on the course. With insight from the smartest, most accomplished experts from every corner of the world. Get ready to elevate your life today.
Joe DeSena here, CEO and founder of Spartan, host of the Hard Way podcast. I've got Jessica Cox on, a friend of mine who's amazing. She sees and has no limits in life, and she's going to teach us a new perspective. Welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me on.
You're amazing. So let's just set the table. Tell everyone how you lost your arms or how you ended up with no arms.
So I was actually born without arms. I always say I really didn't lose anything. I'm not missing anything. This is how it was meant to be. I happen to have two less things than most people have, and it was my reality since the beginning. So I had to go forward in life, and fortunately, babies are very adaptable. And I just picked up on how to live life through my feet instead of hands. And it was very natural learning to do things with my toes and my feet.
Somebody said to me years ago, Joe, we learn helplessness, right? We've got more and more comfort. We've got things just being handed to us. And in your situation, the reverse happened. You figured out how to adapt, like someone who's born and they can't see, right? And then they figured out. So again, I want to be true to our listeners and folks viewing in. How do we get all of us who have it so easy in the first world to change our perspective and maybe have a little more gratitude and appreciate things? Because I bet you have a much better perspective than most of us.
Well, I still have some moments where I have to remind myself, as any human does, regardless of how I should be grateful and the power of gratitude. And it's not until you leave your comforts that you recognize that things are not as easy for others around the world. And I think for me, it was when I realized leaving the United States that, like you're saying, Joe, that, we have a lot of things easier than others around the world, and how fortunate we are. And sometimes that it becomes, because it's our reality, we kind of take it for granted.
We do take it for granted. And, somebody said to me recently, hey, Joe, you know what the biggest problem with my child is? I said, no, what's the biggest problem? He said, my 4-car garage. And so here we are, right? We all want to get ahead, and then we want to have kids, and we want to remove the obstacles for those kids, but really we're doing them a disservice.
It's so true that we want to make it easier on the next generation, because we think that what we went through, that hardship, we don't want that to be a part of their reality. So we do everything we can to coddle and protect them from what we think is hardship. But in reality, the hardship is what helps us to grow, to become stronger and more resilient.
When talking about hardship, when in your childhood did it become clear to you that, hey, this is not easy like everybody else has it?
Well, for me, yes, things did take a lot longer. I didn't have arms, so I'm not only walking with my feet, but I'm walking and doing things with my feet. So I had to learn how to do things standing on one leg, for example. Just the average thing, like opening the refrigerator door. I stand on one leg, reach up with the other foot, which I'm right foot dominant, so my right foot reaches up. And this need for balance was essential. And so my body adapted by constantly doing things on one leg. And sometimes I fell down, sometimes I, lost my balance, hit my head, and especially learning to walk without arms and hands. So I had to develop a thick skin and I had to get pretty tough because of those situations and those occurrences that happened that kind of toughened me up. But in the end, it strengthened a muscle of resilience and it allowed me to get through and do things that were a little harder and not balk at them and say, "Hey, I'm not going to do it because it looks hard," but just do it because I already had the difficult challenges from childhood that I went through at a younger age. And so I essentially became more adaptable. And like any muscle in the body, that muscle of creativity, resilience just became strengthened a little bit more for me because I went through all of these other things in a different kind of way. But it became an asset as I grew older and wanted to do more things. And the moment things crossed my path, I would say, yes, I want to do it. There's no limitation, despite the doubt from all those around me who say, you don't have arms, you can't do it. There's no way, you have a disability. And they wanted, to see the impossibilities as opposed to my mindset, which was to see the creative solution to the possibilities.
Were your parents a huge help?
My parents were huge. Yeah, they were they were my rock growing up, and how blessed I was to have such great parents. My mother who would tell me, "You can do anything." And anytime I went to her with a little self-doubt, she would reassure me, "You know what, Jessica, anything is possible. With God, anything is possible. You'd be surprised." I tell that because she was a nurse, so she'd tell that to her patients all the time. And she told it to her kids all the time. So she was that profound example for me that anything is possible. She lived it and breathed it every day. And my father, who was just there, really solid, grounded, and he helped me to talk things through. And he was always available for me to understand that this mindset, the mindset and the power of mindset.
But there still must have been an incredibly challenging moment or two or 10 where the kids were giving you a hard time or you were frustrated. Like, can you recall a moment that you had to fight through?
Oh yeah, I can't gloss over those difficult times as a child because actually, quite frankly, more difficult than the physical task of living life without arms is the emotional challenge of being different and all the that comes with being different. Feeling of isolation, being picked on or singled out or given a hard time because of my difference, targeted because of it. All those things were really hard on me. I mean, for example, you asked for one example. I remember getting a nickname in elementary school, and they'd call me Captain Hook because I had prosthetic limbs and they were hooks. And I didn't necessarily like that nickname. I mean, to other kids, it may have been memorable and definitely people remembered me, but I didn't like being called that name. And it was my nickname because it was a visual, obvious factor that I had prosthetic limbs that had hooks.
So how do you work through that? Because however you work through it, provides clues for us to work through the in many cases, simpler obstacles that we face.
Well, one thing you really have to do is develop your self-worth and self-love because one of the favorite quotes I have is by Marianne Williamson, and she said, excuse me, it may have been Eleanor Roosevelt, "No one can make you feel inferior without your permission." And that quote is so true because if we are strong within and we have self-worth, self-confidence, really good sense of self, then we're more resilient to those outside forces that come in to try to tear us down. So sometimes we just have to take time to work on ourselves.
Right? Because if you don't give into it, it doesn't exist. When did you first realize, maybe it was 10, 15 years old, that limits are a lie, that there really are no limits?
Well, limits are, it's all perception because if you can see a limit as an opportunity and make that shift, it really changes the way you tackle it. If you see it as a wall, or if you see it as something you can just climb over, then you've really set yourself up for either failure or success. So, for example, I see something, flight training crosses my path, and no one has ever in history flown a plane without arms using just their feet in an unmodified aircraft. And I was about ready to tackle something that had never been done before. But maybe perhaps someone who that opportunity crosses their paths, even if they have arms, may say, oh, that's not for me. I don't know if I'll manage to get through the flight training or something like that. For me, it crossed my path, and I immediately said, well, let's see how we're going to figure this out. It became a puzzle, and that's how limitation should be perceived, as a puzzle that needs to be undone. And that's what I did. I said, well, no one has ever done this. Let's start from the beginning. How do I put my headset on? How do I buckle my seatbelt? And let's move forward. And of course, I had a lot of support as well in my instruction. But I was primarily the first, I had to have a lot of input, and you have to have the desire to do it. You can have all the help in the world, but if you don't have the motivation to do it, and the motivation has to come from within, then, you're not working with much. But if you have the motivation to do it, you have the creativity and the resilience to keep pushing forward and not seeing it as a limitation. It's amazing how things become possible.
Yeah, you basically, the obstacle created the motivation, the discipline, most cases, for most of us, the obstacle defeats us. We haven't even attempted it.
I don't know if that's just because through my lens, most everything from the beginning has been some form of obstacle. And so again, like I say, it's a muscle, and we all have it. And some of us use it more often than not. And so it gets strengthened. And so I always say to other people, try to do things that make you uncomfortable. Go out there and do something you've never done before. Try something that scares you. Do these things to put yourself in those positions to strengthen that muscle.
Well, you built, in fairness, you got to build some obstacle immunity very early in your age, right? Like there was not, like, you had to figure it out. If you didn't open the refrigerator, you weren't eating.
True. I had to, in order to survive. Yeah, it was a survival thing. True. I had no choice, and I just had to move forward with what I had. Some days were harder than others. Some things, like, for example, getting dressed on my own, that was harder than putting food in my mouth with my toes. Because if you see toddlers, they're flexible. They could put their foot in their mouth all the time. So some things, though, getting dressed. How did I get dressed without help and by myself? And so I came up with a dressing tool. And now my nonprofit provides this dressing tool to anyone without arms around the world. We give them the first dressing tool they need for them to be independent, because that independence is such an important part of self-worth, self-confidence.
Throughout your life, what are things, what are obstacles that stop, fully able-bodied people, arms, like what typically stops us that hasn't stopped you? I know you became a pilot, which is incredible, right? Lots of people don't even sign up for that, and it'd be easier for them. But where do you see most people stopping short of full potential, and you didn't?
Well, for example, fear. Fear is an emotional element that stops many people. And what I've learned is that fear is very often connected to the unknown, not knowing what is in store for them by doing something. And so fear is associated with not knowing. So if that's the case, then why don't we learn everything we can to overcome that fear? And I'm going to go back to flight training, for example. I was terrified of flying, losing contact with the ground. And I thought, well, I need to find out exactly how does an airplane flies and why it flies. And what if an emergency happens? What do you do? When I was learning all this information, I realized that it's really fairly safe. I mean, other than pilot error, flying is fairly safe, and there's nothing to be afraid about it. So fear is what stops people oftentimes. And I always say, take one step closer to that fear, overcoming however small that step is. And by learning everything about it, elevating the awareness. And it's amazing how that fear can be overcome.
A lot of great things happen on the other side of fear, right? Like I'm really afraid of sharks. I swam across a bay in Nantucket against my own will. I fought myself, and I came out the other side, and I met my wife. Some great things happen on the other side of fear.
So true. I love it. It's such, everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. Just have to take the step to overcome it and face it.
And it is that unknown. We think the worst. I guess they interviewed a bunch of elderly. It was a great study, and asked them, what do you regret? And the majority they heard from elderly was like, all those things I was worried about never really came true. I wasted a lot of time worrying about things that were irrelevant. All right. Well, I feel like you're selling yourself short. You also happen to have a history with Taekwondo. Tell us about that.
So I practice ATA martial arts. American Taekwondo Association martial arts, and I have been practicing for close to 30 years, little less than 30 years of Taekwondo in my life. And it's been a wonderful way to stay fit, flexible, and have self confidence and build those leadership skills. It's been a wonderful, I still go and practice now as an adult, clearly. And I did it started as as a 10-year-old kid. And it's been a wonderful thing, becoming the first black belt in the American Taekwondo Association who did so without arms was a wonderful title to really encourage others. And it's been wonderful. I've competed before. I've earned a state title for Arizona. So yeah, it's been a wonderful modifying the art of Taekwondo so that it can work for someone without arms has been, again, it's like a puzzle.
What's next for you?
Well, there's so many things that are next for me right now. The big one is the airplane. We're building the first ever airplane in history. They can be flown with feet alone. Now, I've been flying for over, 15, 16 years in a standard plane with just my feet on the controls. No special modifications or special designs to that plane. But now we're building something that's custom, so it's more comfortable for foot flight. And it'll be the first in history. And we are raising the funds to finish off this airplane that we're building called the Impossible Airplane, soon to be the I'm Possible Airplane, to really bring home that message to anyone that disability doesn't mean inability. And disability is more than the visual disabilities that we associate, but disability a lot of times is invisible. And so I'm really working with this amazing team of volunteers to make this airplane a reality. And we're closing in on basically on the final stretch here. By the end of the year, we'll have a finished airplane. It's pretty incredible. We're just trying to raise those funds to finish that off and then fly it around to be a visual reminder to people of what they're capable of achieving.
I love that. How do people find you?
For this airplane, if you want to follow that and help us with the project, it's theimpossibleairplane.com.
You're awesome. I'm glad we met. I'm glad you could help me change my perspective, right? Everybody asks me every day, hey, Joe, how's your day going? Whatever, I'm alive, right? I got to keep reminding myself, like anything is better than dead.